Teenager therapy, because we have problems too.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Teenager Therapy. I'm Gael, and welcome to the next episode of our Swiping Safely series. And in this episode, it's a really exciting one because we're going to be talking to a variety of experts that are going to be breaking down the issue about grooming and predatory behavior and trauma and how to recover from it. So we're going to be able to talk to these experts and get their input on why this is a problem, why so many teens are resorting to these apps, the dangers of it, and the best solutions, and how we could kind of help improve this as a community. So, our first guest will be Timothy Elliott, who is a psychotherapist that specializes in LGBTQ plus counseling. And so, you're going to get to hear him first, but I'll let him introduce himself.
Thank you, Gael. I'm Timothy Elliott. I'm a clinical social worker practicing for over a decade right outside of DC, Washington, DC. Two of my specialty areas are supporting the LGBT community, specifically young people, and the other is helping people recover and heal from trauma. I'm just so excited to be here with you today.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk to you. So as you know, this episode is part of our campaign about the exploitation of LGBTQ plus youth in online communities, and also trying to answer the question of how do we facilitate safer communities for queer youth. And more specifically is the exploitation of LGBTQ plus youth in dating apps and on hookup apps and apps like those. So I guess I would like to start first with what you think about queer youth and the way that the spaces they have available to explore their sexuality, their romantic interests and such. And if you think there's a lack of spaces that cause a lot of youth to kind of maybe search for more desperate means to find comfort.
Absolutely. I'm so glad we're talking about this because I think it is a real issue within the community. Myself, as a queer person, I like to consider myself a youth in retirement, so a little removed from it, but I'm just thinking about my own experiences, plus the experiences of the young people that I'm working with right now. Adolescence is hard. So much going on developmentally and socially, and one of the more challenging things for LGBT young people is to find a space where they are seen and fit in and kind of finding their tribe. So thinking about why so many people do go to some of these dating apps and networking sites is to try to find a safer place to connect. And so it's something I see all the time with my young people, 15, 16, 17-year olds who are logging on. And technology, it's beautiful because it does allow us to connect, but the downside is it's really easy to bypass some of those you have to be 18 requirements for different apps.
Hmm.
And often it's coming from a place of they're just looking for a space to be seen and to be heard and valued in all of who they are and their identity. The downside, as I think you know, and I'm sure is where this campaign is coming from, is that there are a lot of risks to that. Everything from catfishing, and you never really know who's on the other end of it, but also from a developmental standpoint, young people, their brains are still developing, and oftentimes they aren't able to think through some of the real safety risks or concerns around meeting up with someone online or using some of these networking sites. And so I'm just glad that we're talking about it. I think it is a real concern, but it also provides something for them. It provides a space to connect, which so often they don't have in communities, in their
Hmm.
families, in their schools. And so it's kind of out of a necessity that they turn to some of these other apps that do have some harm associated with them.
Yeah. I I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that a lot of these people come to it out of necessity, and I agree with that. And I've even heard the statement that these hookup and dating apps are sort of like a necessary evil in the community. Do you think that's true?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I don't. I'll just come out and say I don't think it's a necessary evil because I think that there are other ways that we as a society and different communities can do better to create affirming and supportive spaces for everyone, regardless of the identity that they hold. I think that as school settings in particular, we do a shit job, to be quite honest. And I've worked in schools for about half of my career, and so I feel like I can say that because I've been part of the system that in many ways has been fucked up and really continues to marginalize an already marginalized community in so many ways. So I think that while it makes sense why young people in particular are reaching out to on these dating apps to find connection and community, I don't think it's a necessary evil. I think that there are other ways that we can create safer spaces for young people to be seen, to be heard, and to feel valued and connected.
And what kind of spaces would that look like?
I mean, thinking through the pandemic, I have a lot of young people who are using Discord, which
Okay.
has its own pitfalls. I mean, there's a lot of squirrely stuff out on the internet anyway, and Discord tends to kind of capture a lot of that and just what I've heard in my experience. But it's a space where they can kind of set up their own servers and bring in groups based on different shared identities, which it's not revolving around sex, which a lot of the dating apps, it's revolving around sex.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest, you know. I think also communities can do a better job of normalizing identities. And I think that we've come a long way around this, but we still have a long way to go. I'm thinking again in schools, just educating teachers and administrators that all identities are welcome and are positive and are part of healthy human development, really challenging homophobic and transphobic remarks, but then creating spaces where young people can come and connect together outside of it just revolving around sex, which a lot of the dating apps I feel like have been revolved around.
Yeah. I think the issue with this, like, just one of the frustrating things about this is that it's such a systemic issue that is just like revolves around just society and homophobic ideas and such that, like, because of that, young people don't feel like they're able to express themselves and be open about who they truly are, and they resort to apps like Grinder and Tinder and Bumble. And I think my question is, I mean, what can you I think the overall goal is to encourage more accepting communities, and we're slowly inching towards that. But when you think about the short term, and being a 13, 14-year old right now and starting high school, wanting to find more people like them, and they feel like they can't, either because maybe their school is just very not accepting of that, and maybe they don't have access to the same like GSA and networking opportunities that like other people in more progressive areas do. What can they do to feel less alone and feel more accepted, and also have a chance to explore
Hmm.
romantic interests and their sexuality and things like that?
Hmm. Yeah, I think one resource that comes to mind, it's a national resource, QChat, which is an online platform specifically for queer young people and giving them a space to connect. And kind of the format they use is they have different kind of topic groups that run every day of the week and are facilitated oftentimes by young people themselves. But a safer place to come and connect with people to start building up those social networks and community. The other piece of it, and I'm glad that you named it. I mean, this is a systemic issue. Tomorrow, we're not going to get rid of Tinder and Grinder. And honestly, I'm not sure if that's really the best thing, kind of big picture. But what we can do, especially for young people, is do more harm reduction and talking about, all right, if this is something that you are going to do, let's talk about how can you do it safer, and how can we just kind of talk through some of the risks around what information you're putting out there, what pictures are you sending, and when you send a message, a picture, or anything over the internet, you are letting go of some of the rights you have to that and the control around where that goes and who sees it. If you are meeting up with people, let's talk through how can we make it as safe as possible. Because I was a teenager, and if an adult told me you can't go meet up with someone, I was going to go meet up with them even more and probably do it more frequently, you know? So I think that harm reduction approach can do a lot of good and really help, especially our younger adolescents, 13, 14-year-olds, start thinking through how can they keep themselves safe? How can we empower them to make healthier choices, even if the options that are available to them aren't the best options?
Yeah, that's that's a really interesting point about harm reduction, and it's something that I've been thinking a lot about. And in this campaign specifically, the two issues that we had come across is it better to encourage people to, delete them and kind of abstinence from these apps, or warn them about the possible dangers and consequences of them and show them how to navigate them, but in a safer way? And that is sort of something that I think is a dilemma, because in some ways trying to preach abstinence from anything is usually not very effective, and especially for this where there's like no other alternative. So it's either
Yeah.
go on these apps and get hurt, or don't experience anything until you're like in your 20s and miss your entire adolescence and have no chances to really find yourself. So, what do you think is the way companies and activists and just individuals should be talking about the issue? And should it be like delete it, or just try to your best to stay safe on it?
Mhm. I do definitely come down on the try to stay safe and coming from that harm reduction for a couple reasons. I think one, if you tell anybody not to do something, they're more likely to do it. I mean, there's a psychological piece to that of defenses go up, and any of the information on why you're telling them not to do it, oftentimes are going in one ear and out the other, right? So, starting right there, if we're really wanting what's best for young people, we've got to build a strong and trusting relationship and connection. And part of that is understanding that there are going to be times where young people are going to do things that we, as either peers or adults, don't necessarily agree with. And that's actually a very important developmental phase for them to differentiate and come into who they are, and also to learn how to manage things that they're going to be expected to do after they get through high school and whatever comes next, and are navigating the world more as an adult. So it's a good learning tool. I think the other thing is it does open up some conversations that I know for adults and parents that I work with can often be very uncomfortable. Um, because dating often is related to sex and sexuality, which for many adults, it's just a not a super comfortable thing. But we've got to take the stigma away and say, you know what, I might not agree with your choices around being on this app, but if this is something that you're doing, let's have real talk about it. Let's kind of break it down, and how can we make this as safe for you as possible? Sometimes I've actually found that when young people are engaged in those conversations, it opens them up to other possibilities of ways of connecting that they may not have thought about before. Because I think a lot of this comes from young people, especially queer young people, don't have the space to talk about the things that are coming up and to explore some of the normal developmental stages of socialization and relationships and sex and sexuality as their non-queer peers do have, because of some of the stigma that's out there. So yeah, I definitely come down on that harm reduction approach, and we need to, as adults and supporters and individuals, kind of look into any of the biases that we hold about some of these dating apps, check ourselves, do our own work, so that we can actually show up and be fully present with a young person if a conversation comes
Mhm.
up, and really give them our full attention, but also helpful information so that they can make safer choices.
I think it was interesting that you said that if you talk about these issues and you really are sincere and honest about your concerns, and you just tell them straightforward what they should be expecting, that makes people more likely to actually maybe try to find other alternatives. So I guess that goes kind of hand in hand with preaching abstinence and how that just kind of blocks people off. But as soon as you kind of just empathize with them and try to understand them, m- you find that there's actually young people start to be like, maybe you're right. I understand, and maybe I should look into other alternatives to this.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, so much of it too is it's just they don't have the space, the literal space to kind of talk through things, and not one of us can process and think through everything on our own. Like none of us are on an island. We need community. Like we are
Yeah.
creatures of community and connection, and especially so during the kind of developmental years of adolescence, young adulthood. So much is happening on a brain science level that we need that perspective and that sounding board, um, to hear ourselves say it, to have someone else witness it and hold it, and to kind of expand our perspectives on what's possible.
Yeah. And another thing is, when it comes to queer communities, a lot of well, one, it's kind of upsetting that this has become such a normalized part of being a young queer teenager that many people just see it as this is part of the queer experience. Like if you go through TikTok and every once in a while a video about a teen sharing their experience and telling someone like, don't go on Grinder or something, the comments are just filled with like, oh, I've been on this since I was like 13. Like it's just normal, right? It's normal. What do you think could be the long-term consequences of normalizing this? Is it why maybe the queer community tends to be very, I guess, sex driven and just sexual in nature from a very young age? Is it because they don't have the chances to explore their sexuality in like a slow burn type of way and they kind of just enter this world all at once?
Mm. Yeah, I think that there is a pressure cooker effect to it because of some of the homophobia and transphobia that is very alive and rampant in our country and in every area of our communities, unfortunately, that it doesn't give the space for healthy sexual development to happen out in the open, you know. Even just thinking of our country, which is a very prudish country compared with other countries and communities around the globe, that sex already has a stigma associated with it when you have sex in ways that are differing than what society sees as kind of the I hate this word, but normal or predominant or whatever those kind of associations are, it makes it even harder for young people, especially, to feel safe enough to talk about it or to think they're allowed to talk about it. So, yeah, I think that that's a piece of it. It's that pressure cooker effect of if it was taught about in schools, like our sex education is shit. And
Yeah.
I've been on some of the committees here in the DC area with school districts that and are the most progressive in the country around sex ed and queer sex ed and just educating at an early age. And it still doesn't go far enough to really normalize things at an early age and create this space for more healthy sexual development throughout adolescence.
That's really, I think, a big part of it. Yeah. It's sex ed. Why do you think I I guess it really just all comes down to just the way society views gay sex and how it's viewed just very much as sinful and gross or just abnormal. So it's unfortunate that a lot of teenagers kind of, I guess, just feel like they're not valid and like they're doing something weird and disgusting. And
Mhm,
I guess maybe that's why when they're finally like exposed to that world, it's sort of just like an instant they have to be just forced to learn everything on their own,
mhm.
which
Yeah.
I think part of that means they'll go on these apps and they'll experiment with much older people because not a lot of people that are their age really have any experience, so that everyone's kind of on the same boat.
Mhm,
Do you think
mhm,
maybe even the lack of sex ed is the reason why so many young people tend to resort and maybe even hook up and have sex with people 10, 20 years older than them?
mhm. I think that's a contributing factor, absolutely. I think that there's also that sense of safety or community, that perception that's there, and unfortunately, oftentimes is not. And we see time and time again that young queer people are connecting with older queer people, and it can open them up to different levels of abuse or maltreatment, unfortunately. But it's this idea or this construct that older queers know and they've experienced it, they can kind of teach me, which in some ways is very true. The elders in our community hold so much wisdom, and we really do need to hold that in reverence and learn from it. But at the same time, I think going back to sex ed in schools, we could be doing a better job at opening up the space and giving accurate, real talk information. I mean, even this idea of gay sex. What is gay sex? There's no gay sex. There's sex with different body parts, with different body
Mm.
types, with different acts and ways of connecting. And if we could talk about it more from kind of that space, I think that we'd be doing a lot of good in creating the space for everybody with all sexual identities and experiences and interests to be able to navigate it a bit safer.
Why do you think that LGBTQ plus youth resort to older men, and has that been so normalized? I mean, you see it in movies like, Euphoria and Call Me by Your Name, which is one of the most popular really queer movies, and it's based around a sort of predatory relationship between a teenager and an older man. Why is that such a large part and just so normalized in the queer community?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about a couple of clients who I've recently worked with, and part of their story and why they gravitated towards older men as they were navigating relationships was because of the negative experience they had with their peers, specifically being homophobic or transphobic and
Mm,
not having the space there. And so in their mind, and they even said this to me, they said, Timothy, there's just no one my age who I'm interested in. And even if there were, the
yeah.
pool is so small. There's only like one or two people that I know that are around my age. Um, I need more options. So I think part of it is a visibility thing. Part of it is a trauma thing that there have been experiences of real negative interactions with peers, and part of it is what we had spoken about earlier, that there's this perception that if you're older, not only are you going to have more experience sexually and kind of help me along, but also just more experience as a queer person navigating the world. Um, Almost like it feels very, much like a mentorship almost, an informal mentorship, if you will,
Mhm.
of having someone who's been there who could guide them through, which in some ways makes sense. In other ways, the world is so different. I mean, I'm mid 30s, and I'm thinking about when I was going through middle and high school and kind of coming to terms and understanding who I was. Uh, it's so different than what young people are going through right now. Thinking about technology, we didn't have the apps back then. Thinking about understanding in communities, we've come a long way. There's still a long way to go, and so that whole idea of I have to find an older queer to kind of guide me sometimes doesn't hold as much merit, and can do some harm.
You said that some of your clients have told you that they're just not interested in people their age, and then that's really interesting because I've definitely heard that same sentiment among, like, my own queer friends, and, I noticed they, like, seek out older men, and I'm like, "Well, why do you do that? Why don't you just try to find people your own age?" And the repeating, statement they tell me, the repeating answer is just, "Exactly, I'm just not interested, like, everyone my age is just too, like, immature and it's just I don't know, I guess maybe queer youth more than anything are just looking for someone to comfort them, and because people around them are young, they can't comfort each others, and they need someone, I guess,
Mhm,
experienced. But
mhm.
what do they need comfort from? What is it that they're
Yeah.
trying to be comforted from?
Yeah. Well, I think part of that is the experience that they've gone through, coming out and coming into ourselves as a queer person can be traumatic. And for non-queer people, they aren't forced to come out or to navigate some of those very sophisticated processes. So part of it is, as a queer person who's come out and gone through is this person going to be accepting? Is my family going to be accepting? Or am I going to have to deal with some backlash, whether it's verbal or physical, or being excluded from friend groups, or being asked inappropriate questions? That can kind of mature them faster than developmentally their brains at, if that makes sense. And so in some ways, when they're connecting with peers, it's almost like, oh, well, what are you complaining about? Like a school assignment or what college you're going to go to? I'm here dealing with real shit of, am I going to get kicked out of my house or not? And they don't feel like they can relate because experiences, lived experience is so different based on the trauma that they've had to navigate through. And so it's sometimes I feel that that's another reason why younger queer people will connect and attach to older queer people, because there's this sense of, oh, you get it in some way. You've been there, and I don't need to explain myself for you. There's this automatic buy-in, which actually makes it feel safer. Um,
Mhm. Another issue, is why are there so many predatory men on these apps. And maybe this is just a larger thing, something that is like common, but it's just more visible in the queer community. But you go on apps like Grinder, and you'll find that there's grown adults that are perfectly okay with hooking up with a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, and they're
Mhm,
willing to do that. I mean, if you go on the app, you say like you're underage, like not many people will care. Why is that
mhm,
so common on these apps?
mhm. I think a part of it is the psychology of anonymity, being able to hide behind a screen. It allows you to do things that maybe you wouldn't do, or lowers inhibitions around that. So I think that that is a piece of it. Just kind of all of these apps are fairly anonymous, or at least to the level that you want them to be, based on what pictures you share and things like that. I think also is the app is there specifically for sex, and I know a lot of people will say that no, it's there for networking and building connections, and sure, I believe you, but I also know that in the experience of many of the people I've worked with, that's why they go to these apps. Is it's an exploration around sex, and are people going to find me attractive, and well, can I explore different sexual behaviors with people? That's what it was created for, you know. So I think that's another piece. It's kind of coming from this area where maybe they have not had spaces to explore things in a safer or more age appropriate way. Again, going back to the homophobia and transphobia in our society, which goes across ages. Like when we talk about the impacts, it's not just on young people, it's on people that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and sometimes impacting them uh, in deeper ways, not ones more or less, but deeper ways because of the experience that was so different as they were growing up and coming into who they are, or understanding a piece of their identity.
You think maybe is part of the reason that a lot of older men seem to be okay and sometimes even actively seek out younger people is because they themselves never got to explore their own sexuality while they were young. So they missed out on like their teen years and their young years. And when they were finally able to like be themselves, they were a lot older. So there's like a sense of what does that feel like? What does it feel like to be young and, be sexually active with someone that's also young?
Absolutely. I think that you're hitting the nail on the head with this one. There is this, I've missed out, and how can I kind of reclaim some of that? That could be a piece of it as well. Absolutely.
Interesting. And I know your specialty is just treating trauma with young people. And, why do they seek out risky behaviors and situations? And I guess there's a lot to unpack here, but first of all, I would just like you to maybe just let us know like why do people seek out these risky behaviors? I know part of it is just out of desperation and there's no other place to do it. Um but what are the consequences of this? How are teenagers dealing with it and what are they experiencing?
Well, with queer teens, we know that they are impacted disproportionately with higher rates of depression, of negative intrusive thoughts, of self-harming or suicidal, either impulses or behaviors, of substance misuse, and just other risky behaviors. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of research done around that. So we have really solid numbers to look at some of the ways that it's impacting our queer young people. But the other piece of it is, how are we helping them connect, both with safe and affirming people and communities, but also to connect with themselves in safe and affirming ways. We've talked a lot so far today about kind of the homophobia that's outside and in our communities, but there is an internalized homophobia that happens just by being a human being navigating a homophobic community. And that's a piece which isn't going to happen overnight. I mean, going back to what you said about this is a systems issue, and it would be nice if we could change things with a blink of an eye. But it does take some really intentional introspection, and finding a place where we can start talking about it safely. Um, for me and my trauma work, most of the work that I do as I'm setting up the work in therapy is building a safe relationship with that young person, because I know any of the work we're going to do at unpacking the the homophobic experience they've had in their schools or the internalized homophobia that they may experiencing, any of the work around doing harm reduction when it comes to some of these apps, or thinking through what are some other safer spaces where you can connect and find your tribe of people. That work can only happen in the confines of a trusting, genuine relationship. And if we don't have that, the best intervention, the best information, again, is not going to land. It's going to go in one ear and out the other. So I always start with we've got to create a trusting relationship. And that means I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes I'm going to tell you stuff that you may not agree with, and that's okay. I actually really value that. I want that here, but I'm never going to lie to you. And that's one thing that I do commit that in our work together, I'm going to keep it real and keep it up front. And I want you to feel like you can ask questions, even if they might be a little bit hard, knowing that I'm not going to judge you, that we all have questions and we need that safe place to be able to explore them together.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of this is internalized homophobia, and that's just a whole nother issue that it's unfortunate that there's no overnight solution. And it's when talking about how you fix this, it's really just small steps and it's a lot of patience. When obviously a lot of young people are coming onto these apps and they're coming onto these apps very innocently and they kind of leave and they're, maybe sexually assaulted and traumatized and maybe get violated or just groomed and a lot of other terrible things that could happen. How do you begin to heal from that? Because after that traumatic experience, many queer youth don't feel the same way about sex. Maybe when they try to have sex with a partner, they start disassociating and they start getting flashbacks of bad experiences, and some maybe don't trust other people anymore, and they don't trust them to let them in their space in such a vulnerable way. So how do you begin to heal from that, especially when you don't have access to therapists and resources and you're just kind of on your own?
hmm I think the first thing is you've got to focus on physical safety, kind of thinking of some of the hierarchy of needs, some of the research and work of Maslow. We've got to look at, are you in a place where you are physically safe and have your basic needs met? That's got to be priority one. And if you're not, how can we do some safety planning to help you get there? Whether it's around looking at how can we just get you through high school to where you maybe you're at college or living on your own to do more of this work because perhaps where you're living isn't a safe place to start exploring this. I even tell that to young people who are questioning whether they should come out or not because they're they're afraid their parents or caregivers might kick them out or have some other negative repercussions. And I'm always of the mind of we have to do what's going to be best for you. And if that means keeping this private until you are more self sustaining and can meet some of your basic needs, let's do that. And at the same time, how can we connect you with other supports online, finding communities that of queer people that understand where you can be open with just to get you through that. But for me, it comes back to we've got to focus on that physical safety first because all of that work, if you try to do it too soon or too quickly, it's going to make things worse. That's what we know about kind of the neuroscience of trauma is that re-traumatization and flooding can happen. So oftentimes I'll have young people who come in and say, hey, this horrible thing happened to me, this assault, I want to work on it. And I'm like, I'm here. I want to work on it as well, but you've just met me. So it's not going to be safe for you to re experience and tell me all the details about this assault. We've got to get to know each other. We've got to talk about boundaries and how therapy works. We've got to talk about your experience in therapy before. And are there positive experiences that really worked? Are there times where it just missed the mark? And that's information that's helpful as we're kind of creating the safe space together here to do that work that's coming down the line.
Yeah. And is there a way to that peers can help their own friends and that you know what kind of work can a friend do to make a queer friend feel better and just more comfortable and just be supportive?
hmm I think the first thing is believe them. If they're sharing something with you, don't take that as an opportunity to enter into a debate, especially if it's something about who they are or their identity or an experience they've had. Believe them. And I often recommend asking, what would be most helpful? Do you just need someone to talk to? Do you want me to help you find resources, connect with maybe a trusted adult who can get you other supports or help that a peer might not be able to help? But believing someone and listening to them in those moments does go a long way.
I agree. I really want to emphasize just asking them what they want, because I think sometimes young people, obviously, you can't really blame them because they're not professionals, but they tend to maybe give them arguments or debate with them. And like you said, just do everything but listen. And I think it's important that you just ask them what it is you want. And there's no shame in not knowing what your friend wants, even if they're your best friend. You think you should know. There's no shame in that either. It's good to ask.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, none of us are mind readers, you know. So
exactly, exactly.
we have to ask. That's the only way that you're going to know for sure what the other person needs is by them telling you.
Yeah. So those were all the questions that I had. Was there anything else I missed that you think is important to talk about?
You know, the other thing, I'll just piggyback off of this last question that you asked, and when it comes to what can we do for our peers who might be going through a rough time, helping them do things that will ground them. So often, high school is hectic, and thinking especially about this past year where so much has changed with the pandemic, that takes a huge toll on our nervous system. And so, without our even conscious awareness around this, we're at phase 10 around anxiety and stress, and that takes toll on our whole body and just physical being. And so if there are ways to say, hey, can we just chill, or can we listen to music? We don't have to do anything specifically, but just be together. Can we maybe go for a walk? Movement is great, and I've had a lot of young people, as things have opened up more and vaccines are coming out, that are going out and meeting up with friends just to walk around the neighborhood. I have one young person who says, I go and we walk for an hour. We maybe say 5 words to each other, and that's fine, but it's just the fact of being physically together and walking can help bring that nervous system back into a space where it needs to be for optimal learning. Um, for any of us, you know.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that we can do is, don't feel like if someone's sharing something hard, we've got to jump right into action. Oftentimes, we actually need to slow down,
Okay.
and that can be a really helpful strategy for a friend who might be going through a hard time.
That's really good advice. I've never like That's the first time I've heard about something like that. So that's incredibly helpful. And I'm sure this conversation as a whole has been incredibly helpful for a lot of young people that both are wanting to understand this issue more and just how to help others and help themselves. So thank you, Timothy, for joining me. It was a pleasure talking to you and just hearing you talk about all these issues. It was incredibly informative and just educational.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for inviting me on the show.
And our next guest is Matthias, who is a therapist that will be talking with us today about just hopefully just giving you guys some great advice and wisdom on how to deal with the consequences that unfortunately arise because of this issue. So, Matthias, do you want to give us a quick introduction to you and what you do?
Yeah. Hi, how you doing? Yeah, thanks. I'm a psychotherapist in Spokane, Washington, and I just I've been seeing clients for the past several years, and then recently started making some content online, and so I'm posting videos on TikTok and Instagram, and just kind of have joined the conversation on what it looks like to pursue mental health and to move towards what matters, even despite hardship and conflict, and pain and suffering is pretty diverse. There's a lot of different ways that people can suffer and go through hard times. And so it's an honor to kind of just join the conversation and get to talk about how we can move towards what's meaningful, even despite that.
Yeah. So, what exactly is psychotherapy?
Yeah, well, that's just like mental health counseling, psychotherapy. Those are kind of just words for the same thing. So whenever you see a therapist, whenever you're going to counseling, that's psychotherapy. So as opposed to like physical therapy or, like I'm not
Okay.
here to help you work out your ankle injury. I'm
Right,
here to
right.
talk about what's going on in your heart. Yeah, so that's kind of what that is.
Okay, great. So,
Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest issues that, or one of the biggest consequences that teenagers, you know, experience while on these apps is, well, first, let's dive into the reasoning that leads people to this situation in the first place. A lot of queer people, a lot of LGBTQ plus teenagers go their entire lives not getting the same opportunities to explore their sexuality and romantic interests the same way that a straight person might. And so, because of this, many teenagers are in search of validation, and they're in search to find comfort and experience love. So, what do you think is, what do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, I think that loneliness is something that really pushes us towards not just like the worst parts of ourselves, but kind of the worst in the world, and we just become desperate when we get like cripplingly lonely. And because it's a need, like to have that companionship, to have that, to be seen with people that we love and admire and want to surround our lives with, is a human need. And so I think that, yeah, when we feel like we're in a world where we look around and we're like, okay, I can't really be myself, I can't really talk about what I'm going through, I can't connect with people freely, or at least the avenues to be able to do that are, I don't know, present problems and boundaries that I don't know how to overcome, then I become, I don't know, desperate. I look for any means necessary to be able to kind of reach that very human need. And so that's where people kind of find themselves in
The
dangerous
need
sometimes. Yeah.
the need for comfort and for having others around you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Do you think why don't you think people can find this in themselves?
Well, I think that we are formed in community with human beings. Like, for example, there's been lots of studies done on just like little infants and how they grow up and how much like time they get with their caretakers, how much they get to have, like I have a little girl right now. My wife just had a kid 3 weeks ago, and that we just like spend a lot of time just staring at her face, and she's kind of looking back at us, and she's pretty confused about who we are, and and we're getting to know who she is, and there's just lots of like mirroring, which just means that she makes like a really surprised face, and then I make a really surprised face. She kind of maybe will crack a smile, and then I crack a smile, or she's crying and I'm attending to her and trying to comfort her. So there's like, from the very beginning, from the first moments that we're on this planet, we are building who we are with another person. We're building who we are in the context of our family, of people that we love. And as my little girl gets older, she'll be a toddler, so she'll start to form words, and she'll form words that I've formed because she'll speak English, like she'll use my
Yeah.
vocabulary. She'll describe things in the way that I describe things. And so, when it comes to like finding that settledness, finding that inner peace or calm, that's not something that's a single person sport. That's a team sport. That's something that we form together. We regulate and discover who we are in the context of people we love and that love us.
And I think do you think there's a certain age where you can truly understand what love is?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that we mean a lot of different things when we say love. I think there's ages where we can feel, maybe if we don't know how to understand or talk about that love from a parent, or maybe feel what the absence of that love is, like when we don't feel understood or we don't feel seen. Even little toddlers know what that feels like, even if they don't know how to talk about it. And maybe as we get older, we learn how to put words to what we feel in our chests around the love that we experience or don't. What do you think?
I think I've always felt that when approaching love, and a lot of older people will tell a teenager that you don't truly know what love is.
Mm,
And when you're young, it certainly feels like you do. But another thing I was considering is that I think the more love you experience, the more you understand what it truly is and what love feels like. Because if you've only ever, let's say you've only dated one person and you feel like you love them,
yeah,
well, how do you know there isn't someone that will show you that you're capable of loving even more? And so, because of that, I think that life is definitely just a constant experience of discovering new heights and new intensities of the same emotions you've always felt, which I guess
yeah,
doesn't really, it shouldn't undermine the fact that when you're young, that was what you knew and that was your reality. So at the time, that was love to you, even though it might not have been later on.
yeah. Oh, so well put. Yeah, I think we also, the way that we were loved as kids and the way that we're growing up inform how we love and try to connect with other people too. And so when I like what you're saying when you're just saying, oh, that first romantic connection that we have somebody like tells us a lot about us, and then we're not really sure like, is that what romantic connection is like, or could I have a different connection with somebody different? And those are all, questions that we ask and explore within the context of, I don't know, the love that we were shown as kids.
And do you think that first romantic connection you experience, your first love, does that shape what you feel like love is capable of? And I mean, I think for a lot of these kids, they're going into these apps not having ever experienced the intimacy of another partner. And because of that, their first experience is someone that could be 5 to 10 years older than them.
Right.
And to them, that's what they think love is. That's what they think comfort is. Is it possible to override that? And are there certain effects that experience will leave on an individual?
Yeah, I guess it depends on that first experience. I think there's, like we were saying before, there's just some very basic desires and needs for just companionship, to be seen, to be known, to be loved, for the unique parts of us to shine through, and for those things to be accepted. We desire to feel that companionship and wholeness, right? And I think there's a romantic part of that. Like when we romantically connect with people, that's an expression, and that's unifying ourselves with another person to whatever degree, in a way of trying to match, like, okay, who are you? Who am I? And we're almost like looking into another person as a mirror, and other people kind of reflect different things back at us. And so I don't know, for example, like they see the artistic and creative parts in us, and they really admire those things. And so they're really supportive of our art and of our work, or they really kind of love the intellectual vigor that we put into conversations as we explore the world. And they're like, oh, you're so smart. I love just like asking you questions and hearing you talk about the things that you're interested in. Maybe I don't know, they really connect with us in a physical way, and that we feel really just warm and comforted and attended to when we connect with them physically. And so there's this, it's like whenever you're in a relationship, there's something reflected back at you, kind of like a mirror. And so that first relationship, sometimes we think that the only parts of us that matter, the only parts of us that have value, is what was reflected back to us in that first relationship. And that's why I like what you're saying, that hey, there's a variety of different connections that you can have with people, and you're going to have different experiences, not just with other people, but also with yourself.
That's really interesting. I think that first relationship is, I guess, what you determine is worthy of being loved, since that's what you first knew. And I think that's where the danger comes in having do you think there's a danger in having a bad first experience?
Sure. Yeah. I don't know. I think all of us have like kind of these peripheral first experiences, like in grade school and in like middle school, and that I think all of us have a story where it's like, oh, that went terribly wrong. Like I like you just have a crush on somebody, or you like somebody and it wasn't reciprocated, or they thought you're weird, or you're rejected, or maybe it went great, but then it ended like in flames, and someone you really cared about, someone that was like your whole world, suddenly just isn't a part of your life anymore, and it's hard to even think about who you are in light of that. Yeah, it has a huge impact. Absolutely.
And I think for a lot of people, a lot of teenagers on these apps, they enter very, filled with hope that they'll find a special someone, that they'll find someone they can connect with, that cares about them. And what they end up finding is actually very different from that. It is instead a world filled with predators and just predatory behavior, and a lot of abuse and assault and things that they could have never imagined. And when they leave, they leave very damaged and with a warped perception of their own self-worth, their self-esteem, their image. How do you even begin to overcome something like that?
It's a great question. Whenever you go through any form of trauma, and trauma, maybe I'll define that real quick, because everyone has a different thing that they mean when they say trauma. It's kind of a buzzword. Trauma is like pain from the past that's still hanging out with you in the present. It's this pain that has imprinted itself upon you in a way where you feel like you can't get out of the past, like it's still kind of inside your head. Like you're not really here. You're not really in the present moment. You're not in the current relationship. Like you're still back there. There's a piece of you that hasn't caught up. Maybe that's one way to think about it. It's when you learn. It's also maybe just like an existential crisis, in that you learned something new about the world, but you don't really know what it is yet. Like maybe you didn't know the world was that unsafe. Maybe you didn't know the world was that fragile. Maybe you didn't know you were that fragile. Maybe you didn't know that people could be that malicious. And so you're kind of like warped and confused about like what exactly just happened. So for example, like if you got bit by a dog, as a young kid, and you're terrified of dogs now, it's because like, whoa, those things were like fluffy and snuggly, and I thought those things were totally safe. And then like you get bit by a dog, and it just shatters your universe because you're like, I didn't know those things were dangerous, like descendants of wolves. Like now I don't know what to think, and that's kind of the crux of trauma. Is like I don't know what to think anymore. I don't know where to go from here. I don't know if I'm safe or if I'm in danger. I don't know if things are okay or if things are disorganized. I'm just kind of crushed. And so moving into a relationship that maybe was your first relationship early on, you're kind of like texting somebody, you're meeting someone online. Like there's so many unknowns. And so you start to kind of form the picture of what you think's going on here, who you think that person is, and if they're safe, and if there's someone you want to connect with. If, like we were saying earlier, there's a mirror, right? That you're shining parts back at you that maybe you like, and you're discovering something new about yourself as you're discovering who they are. But then there's like a betrayal, or something goes completely off the rails, and it's not just you're questioning that person, it's you're questioning your own ability to assess if you're safe or not, you're questioning your own ability to understand if you're okay. And that's where things can become traumatizing. And for a lot of us, we don't really have the tools or understand, like, how can I tell if I'm in a safe situation? How can I tell if things are okay? How can I tell if this person's trustworthy, especially if it's online? Because like you said, it's not obvious that it's an equal playing field. Like if you're LGBTQIA, like you're looking around at high school, and it's not like you have this huge pool of people to start engaging with, because not everybody is, out or, straightforward about like who, what their preferences are as far as who they want to connect with. And so it's highly sophisticated and complicated to try to connect with people in person. And it's one of the huge benefits of the internet is it can connect to people all over the country, all over the world, that are living an experience just like you. But there's also a whole realm of unknown factors that can, like you're saying, can impose a lot of risk. And so having tools and being able to like identify what a safe and unsafe situation is paramount to being able to form a really satisfying, rich connection with somebody in a way where you're not opening yourself up to being traumatized.
Yeah. How do you you mentioned that there's a time, and because of a series of events that happened in the past trauma, you start to fear the unknown. And if you experienced abuse in a relationship, in a past relationship, and you're scared to go into a new one because you're scared of getting hurt, you're scared of getting betrayed, assaulted, or anything else, how do you begin to overcome that?
Yeah, it's a great question. You got to learn the lesson of what happened. That's part of it. So, for example, if I was in a relationship where someone cheated on me, and I didn't see it coming at all, maybe they've been cheating on me for a year, and so that's like a crisis, right? Because that doesn't just rewrite what you think about that person. That rewrites that entire year of your life. All these moments that you thought you were safe, you were actually in the presence of someone untrustworthy, and so. And you were blind to it. You didn't know. You didn't know that they were cheating on you or that they were with somebody else. And so part of what makes that traumatizing is that you don't know which situations are safe or not safe. Like your smoke detector wasn't working is another way to put it. Like you couldn't sense that this was burning down. And so what you got to do is go back and redial the smoke detector so that you can sense for next time if you're safe or not. And so a lot of these situations, whether it's something horrific like abuse or like being harmed, or whether it's something like being betrayed, or even if it's something, pretty common, like just like you're in a relationship with someone that really you connected with, and you thought things were going great, but now they fell out of love, or they became disinterested in you, and you don't know why. Like you gotta do some work and find out why, and not why as in like you got to figure out what that person's experience was, and like, because you can't read someone's mind, but you have to be able to kind of tell for yourself, like, when can I tell when I'm in danger? How can I tell if I'm really connecting with someone or if they're on a different page? How can I tell if I'm in a situation that's dangerous and could lead to my harm? And when you start to update that, you start to gain more information, you start to gain more insight, then you can go into the next relationship confident that, okay, well, I know what to look for. I have an updated smoke alarm. And maybe it can't catch every kind of smoke, but at least it can catch the smoke, at least that I've encountered in the past. But when you go in blind or you're going without any lessons learned, yeah, I mean, you're as naive as you went in going in the first place. And that's, of course, you'd feel nervous. You have the right to feel nervous. You need to update the smoke alarm.
Yeah. So is it really just a matter of learning from your past experiences and just having the courage to, I guess, have the courage to enter a situation where you know your feelings might possibly get hurt?
Yeah, maybe so.
Do you?
I'm afraid that some people, might be listening and thinking like, it just might not be worth it. Like,
Mhm.
I just, to get hurt like that again, to risk actually opening up my heart and being open to love, like that, that's more risk than it's worth. But then you have to just think like, well, why is it scary to you? Like, well, it's scary because I could be in a relationship and then I could be hurt again. It's like, well, what about that hurt? What about the whole situation falling apart hurt? And it's like, well, part of the hurt is that I'm all lonely now and I'm rejected and I'm by myself. I'm like, okay, well, forcing yourself to be by yourself is a weird solution for the fear of being by yourself. That might have been a confusing sentence, but like,
Yeah.
it's like, it's a solution that actually creates the problem that you're scared of. It's like, if I'm
Yeah.
scared of rejection, it's like, why is rejection scary? Because rejection leaves you alone. Rejection leaves you alone with no one to have it as a companion. And it's like, well, in addition to a lot of other things, but in the sense of being alone, avoiding people to avoid being alone is not a good strategy. So you got to open yourself back up
Yeah.
with lessons learned.
That's interesting. I think a lot of people that, experience traumatic experiences in the past definitely they tend to close up and they're scared
Mm-hmm.
of you really being hurt like that again. So that's a really good point you made, that I guess it is the solution, that a lot of these things is just, you just have to be able to pick yourself up and do it again and just learn from your mistakes. And that's kind of as far as that goes. I think for queer people in general, what they feel is a I think it's about feeling accepted, and
Yeah.
it's about feeling validated. How do you begin to find that in yourself, especially when, maybe you haven't experienced the same things others have? How do you feel that you are worth the same, or that you have the potential to have those experiences as well?
Yeah. Well, something that comes to mind immediately, it's not an unfamiliar circumstance to be in, to be like, I don't know how to find any sort of like positive, like stable identity or version of myself, and like these reinforcers to my identity. How can I find that in me without having to be dependent on kind of all these outside opinions and everyone's thoughts and opinions about me? Like, how can I find that in myself? And a question that came to mind as you were talking was, well, like, let's say that there was somebody else similar in your shoes that you were talking to and was coming to you for advice, and let's say, so they're exploring for the first time this queer identity that feels very foreign yet familiar, and there's parts of it that are really scary. There's relationships maybe in their friends or their family that are in question about if they'll feel validated and seen by them, if they'll feel at home, or if they'll feel judged, if they feel condemned, if they feel rejected. And there's this whole world of questions that we don't know the answer to about how all those relationships are going to come together. And instead of trying to control all that and be anxious about that, there's a desire to be kind of settled and whole in in your own character and in your own heart, so that you're not on the roller coaster of everyone else, everyone else's opinion about you. So how do you kind of arrive at that center? Like, what advice would you give to them if someone told you that they were feeling worthless? Like, what would you say? Well, you'd probably come near to them compassionately, right? Like, you'd probably want to hug them. Like, you'd
Yeah.
probably want to hold them close. Like honestly, a lot of those things become pretty clear when it's about someone we love. Like, let's say it was like your little brother, your little sister, your little niece, your cousin. Like, if it was someone younger and they came to you and they needed comfort, what would you do? How would you encourage them? And then the answer becomes pretty clear, that it's less about having kind of these perfect, well-framed monologues of advice, it's more about just that warmth and compassion. And I think that, and that's something that we learn to give ourselves too. It's a whole different skill than offering it to somebody else. But sometimes
Yeah.
the version of us that knows how to love other people can teach the version of us that's learning how to love ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. And
What do you think
lastly,
about that, though? What
I
comes to mind for you?
I think that um in terms of self-love, I definitely think that it's really just it's acceptance more than anything. It's not necessarily about being in love with every aspect of yourself, but just coming to accept it. Um, and I think that's also where confidence comes from. It's really all just about accepting your flaws and that, maybe today you look ugly, but I accept that fact and I still love myself regardless. And I think um, that's how I think about it.
Yeah, yeah, and and I think even even in those spaces, like the idea of like, okay, if I was giving advice to somebody younger that I cared about, it's like for someone who's really self-critical and frustrated at themselves, like, oh, I feel like I look ugly. I feel like I don't know, that I'm stupid. I feel like I'm unlovable. It's like if you heard someone that you loved, that like your little niece, cousin, nephew, like what would you say to if someone said that to you? Like you probably wouldn't be like, yeah, you're probably right. You're pretty ugly and stupid. So like you wouldn't
Yeah,
you wouldn't do
exactly.
that. And then you wouldn't grill them, would you? You wouldn't berate them. Be like, oh, how
No.
dare you think that about yourself? Like I can't believe it. Da, da, da. Like you would be warm and you would be compassionate. And compassion is just this like love and action trying to actually draw them near. And I think, I mean, like you were saying, that's where that comes from.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that's really important for a lot of our listeners because it's definitely something they struggle with. Um,
Mhm.
I think lastly, it's to wrap this up. It's when you find yourself in a desperate when you feel desperate enough that you want a relationship, you want to be when you're desperate for that intimacy and that experience, and you don't have access to a safe way to go about that, how do you stop yourself from turning to dangerous alternatives as a way of getting that validation and that romantic experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I think there's two things because I could sit here and tell everyone like, hey, don't get on Tinder and Grinder and all those apps. That's bad and it's dangerous. But then you
Yeah.
have someone like a home, but like, I don't know. I don't have a lot of outlets to connect with people just at my school or in my friend group, and that's all complicated. And then there's all these people online that seem to have a similar experience to me, and like I could tell, just like I could tell you, just don't do it. But that's not helpful. That's not helpful advice. Like the question would be like, how can you tell if you're safe, and how can you tell if you're in an okay place? And and kind of like we were talking before, like what are the lessons learned? Like what actually can keep you in a place where you know that you'll be okay? And I think that there's like a few things I can share them with you if it feels
Yeah.
relevant, like that I think might be helpful if you're trying to kind of find connection with people online. Um,
Yeah.
there's some common themes that you can look for. So what you want to be able to do on first hand is be able to identify who the person is, like what age range there are, what their basic information is, instead of concealing information. And so that doesn't have to be like your address and all that kind of stuff, but that just has to be like, okay, do you know how old this person is, and then like are they in the same country, like did they go to a high school, like just some basic information that you can verify and understand that who this identity is. Like danger likes to hang out in secrecy, and so if you're oftentimes in these online kind of platforms, you're interacting with profiles, you're interacting with avatars, and that's a place full of danger. And so like you want to actually, even if it initially you kind of find people, like let's say you're gaming or something and you kind of meet people in these on sites or online, it's like getting to a place before you become sexual, before you become like romantic, before you become anything like that, having just some basic information like that you would know from any like person walking next to you in a grocery store. Like what is your
Yeah.
age, and like where are you at? So the second would be that there's elements of friendship before there's elements of romance, like that you can actually get to know, like what are their interests, what are their favorite music, what is their you know what do they like to do when they're bored. Like some of those basic things are really helpful to know. Like if you notice that conversation is getting really heavily romantic or sexual right away, that's a red flag. Like
Mhm.
if you're trying to find connection with people and they're just trying to gear the conversation towards sexual content immediately, like that is a signal of danger. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, another one would be that's just a demonstration of respect. Like when you're talking, there isn't mocking, there isn't intimidation, there isn't threats. And even threats towards themselves, like, hey, talk to me. If you don't talk to me, I'm going to hurt myself. If you don't talk to me, I'm going to kill myself. Like,
Hmm.
those are just signals that you're dealing with somebody that might not be safe, and not might be somebody who's ready for a romantic connection with someone online, that might need some mental health treatment, that might need something like a supportive system around them, and that kind of being pulled into those kinds of relationships can create codependency and danger in that as well. And then lastly, another like red flag to kind of look for might be that if you sense like a high amount of like them trying to isolate and kind of playing favoritism, meaning like they are trying to kind of keep you for themselves, and they don't want you to know who their family is. They don't want to know who your family is. They don't want to meet your friends. They don't want to game like on public platforms. They just want like you and them. Everything's just by yourselves, like texting or streaming or zooming, whatever. And you just feel like this weird sense of possessiveness where they're trying to make decisions for you. They're trying to like take over your choices. Maybe they're trying to give you advice, but they get really mad if you don't follow their advice. That is also a sign of danger. That's a sign that you're dealing with somebody that might not have just the personal resolve of character to be able to hold your choices as well as their preferences. And so those are four things that I think are really helpful when you're trying to find connections online. It's like knowing just basic information about them. What is their age? What is their like where they live? Like being able to have friendship elements and like common interests before moving into anything like romantic or sexual. Being able to demonstrate respect, not having any sort of like mocking or intimidation, being able to have some genuine respect, and then also looking out for possessiveness, things like trying to overrun your autonomy and make choices for you. So those are the four things that I
That's really great. That's really great. Thank you. Is there anything else that you think is important that I haven't asked you about?
I think this was a really robust conversation. We covered a lot of ground pretty quick. I'm really thankful for the opportunity to talk. I think this is a cool podcast and a place that's safe to ask hard questions. And so I really admire the work that you're doing and the work that this podcast is doing to create access to information like this for anybody who's going through a hard time. So much respect.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing as well. I think the world could use a bigger supply of psychotherapists and just therapy in general. So I admire that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Hey, it's Thomas, and I'm joined by a very special guest.
Hi, I'm Ebonique Bethea from RAINN.
So, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Ebonique Bethea, like I said. I'm the clinical director here at RAINN. And I've been with RAINN for about 7 years now. I am a licensed social worker. So I've worked in the field of really providing services to those impacted by trauma for about 15 years, but specifically working in the realm of sexual violence in the last 7. And so that is definitely, after working so many years in other areas, what I noticed was that there are so many people who are impacted by sexual violence that seek services in a variety of places, and there's no one who's really supporting them in their healing or really providing them the space to talk about what they've experienced. And so I dove feet in and haven't left.
So we thought that she would be a very perfect expert who could share some insight with us. As our campaign is focusing on grooming, and one of the consequences of grooming is trauma. So I hope we can get some insight and a little bit of advice and have our questions answered. So the first question is, how does grooming traumatize youth?
So grooming actually traumatizes youth because essentially it exploits their trust. You know, perpetrators use grooming to actually connect with youth, and really it's a false connection, right? Because they're using that connection in order to either use the trust to exploit that youth, to harm that youth, to manipulate. And so it really impacts the youth's sense of trust, because once they're ultimately harmed or exploited by this perpetrator, this is someone they trusted. This is someone that they were connected to. And so, and for them, that trust was real. It was authentic. And so, how do I trust someone else after that? If someone that I thought cared about me, thought loved me, or whatever, if I thought that of you and I trusted you, how do I trust again? How do I know if the next person, what their motives are? Are they trying to exploit me? Are they going to harm me? So it really impacts just that baseline, that standard of trust. And when that happens at a young age, it really impacts folks later on into their adulthood, because in adulthood, you know, um, survivors of sexual assault or those who experience grooming um, often find it difficult to trust others. So it really impacts someone's life when they are exposed to grooming at a young age.
And when they face grooming, when they are groomed and they're
Mhm.
exploited and they're abused, how do they get over it? And where, like, how can they start to better themselves? Where can they seek help?
Okay. So one way someone can try to move forward after experiencing grooming or exploitation, abuse, assault, anything like that, is the first thing is giving yourself permission to feel, because so often the person who was grooming them will try to discount or discredit how they feel. That a lot of emotional abuse that is connected to grooming, and so it's beginning to trust yourself again and giving yourself permission to feel how you feel. If you want to cry, you have every right to. If you're angry and sometimes want to break something, hopefully, it's not something expensive, but giving yourself permission to feel. And then also giving yourself permission to seek support from those you do feel like you can trust. And it's not, sometimes there aren't a lot of people we think we can trust. And sometimes we may not have anybody we can trust. And so that's where hotlines might come into play. Of course, I work at RAINN and we have the National Sexual Assault Hotline. But there are other hotlines depending on what you've experienced that can really be a place where you can get some confidential and anonymous services if you don't feel like you have anyone in your life that you can trust with what you've experienced. And some people really don't have anyone, so or they're too afraid, and so connecting with sometimes a professional or someone outside of your family or friend circuit might be the best first step, just to explore what your options are. But definitely seeking support and giving yourself time. Like giving yourself time to to be upset, to grieve, to recover, to sometimes have a good day and sometimes have a bad day, but give yourself the space to do that, because it's not your fault. No matter what anyone tells you, no matter how the guilt trips or the shame that the perpetrator may put on you, it's not your fault. And you do have to give yourself the space to really be able to cope and to reach out for support.
So you've worked with a lot of these victims. A lot of them are underage. What is your personal approach to healing from this kind of trauma and sexual assault?
Um, So for me to start with, it's starting with self compassion. That's something that I always would tell survivors that I speak with, that you have to give yourself some compassion. You did not know that this person was ultimately trying to harm you or hurt you, and so however it may seem in your mind that this is somehow your fault, it's not. And you have to be able to have some self compassion and realizing that trauma, whether it's sexual violence or physical violence, is really processed through various parts of us. So it's processed through our emotions, it's processed through our mental and our thoughts, and it's processed through our physical body. And so all of those pieces have their own healing and coping that they have to go through, right? And so there are times like you may hear folks who've experienced sexual violence or those who have gone through grooming and gaslighting, where they may say like they're feeling intense shame, intense guilt about what they've experienced. That's that emotional piece, and so you're gonna have to heal there. That's a place. That's a place that's gonna have to be healed, and so that might be therapy, that might be journaling, that might be going to support groups, that might be some type of art therapy. Healing can look so many different ways depending on the person. And that's one thing that our hotline works with visitors on, is how to identify what your healing techniques will be and what your healing journey can look like. But knowing that there are these different pieces of us, your physical body, there are some folks who have like physical, like headaches after they've experienced trauma, or constant stomach issues. Like they always feel like their stomach is in knots because that's a part of the trauma that they've experienced and how their body is manifesting it and presenting it. And so they have to be able to find things that help with healing. What soothes you? Is it drinking a warm cup of tea? Is it being out in the sun? Is it taking days where you don't talk to anybody? You just have a day for you. Like it's really about identifying what are the things that speak to you, and that is what your healing can look like. And it's not a one size fits all. So there's no and there's no right way to do it. Because there are people who will tell you you need to go to therapy. You have to go to you have to go to groups. No one can say that because maybe that's not what your healing journey is going to look like. And so, knowing that the best way you can do it is the way that speaks to you and not to someone else. And also noting that there'll be good days and bad days, like I said before. So if you've had 12 good days and then one really bad day, it doesn't mean that you're not healing or you've regressed or you're doing something wrong. It just means that there's going to be some good days and some bad days. But the more you keep pushing, the more you keep going, those good days start to outlast those bad days.
I completely agree. I think that is so honest and real that a lot of people heal in different ways, and healing is not just one linear graph. There are curves. There's like it's just one long process, and I think forgiveness and patience is a very, very big component of that. So dating apps are contributing to a lot of this grooming, a lot of this sexual violence, a lot of this abuse. So what advice would you give to underage people going on these dating apps to fulfill their needs?
I mean, I start with safety has to be the priority. We know that there are folks that are on these apps who their purpose, their sole reason that they're on these apps is to harm. Like they are looking for folks that they can take advantage of, that they can lie to, they can groom, they can manipulate. And so coming into if you're going to use dating apps, being very aware and honest with yourself, like, hey, there are folks on here who don't mean me any good, right? They are seeking to hurt others. And so I need to, if this is something I really want to do, because I mean, we don't have to use dating apps, but right now it's a little, being quarantined is hard. And so, how do I identify like what are the safest dating apps, and what does it mean to be a safe dating app? What are the process? What are the protocols that they have in place? What are the standards? How is my information protected? Um, How do they, vet people who are on this? If they do that, how do they ensure safety? What if I have a complaint? What do they do? Like really doing your homework on these dating apps that you're deciding to log into, and then also going into, if you're going to do online dating or utilize dating apps, being clear on what is okay to share and what is not. You know, being able to set your boundaries. Hey, I don't give people this information. They don't need to know the city that I live in. Really being able, and different, of course, different apps, they have requirements, various requirements. And so if those requirements violate your boundaries, you don't even need to, to deal with that app, because we're talking about perpetrators accessing this information and utilizing this information to harm others. And so, what I want young people to really understand, I want everybody to understand who's using dating apps. You really have to be able to say, well, what's my boundaries? What do I want known about me? What am I okay with? If someone, what discussions am I okay with? Am I not okay with someone bringing up sex on the first two times we talk to each other or we chat each other? And I explain that and they still do it. Bye, gotta go. I mean, really being able to set boundaries when you're talking with people. Hey, I'm not okay with that, or this is like how I want to communicate. I don't want to have I don't like receiving communications after 11 p.m. you know if this person is like sending messages all night or sending pictures of themselves and you say I don't like, bye, gotta go. So it's really about being able to set your boundaries. If there's anything I can say, set your boundaries and hold firm to them. If someone won't respect them and honor them, bye. There's someone else out there.
Exactly. And it's really important for you to realize that you aren't obligated to give anyone anything. Like they are just some stranger online. You don't need to send nudes. You don't need to share your information if you don't want to. So please, take those precautions and keep yourself safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And the last question is, what is sexual wellness and what does it look like?
So I actually love that question. Because when I think of sexual wellness, I really think of any sexual activity between partners or any sexual activity where boundaries are respected, consent is honored and requested and acknowledged, and where there is open communication without fear. And so there are so many relationships and there's so many sexual experiences that can occur that doesn't have all of those pieces, but for it to be wellness and for it to be healthy, there has to be I have to be able to communicate my boundaries, and you have to be able to communicate your boundaries and they be respected and honored, and consent has to be at the core of it, because if everything that's happening is not consensual, then we're talking about an abusive situation. If it's not consensual, we're talking about some manipulation of some sort, some coercion of some sort, and that all is unhealthy. That coercion can never be healthy. So, really, really being able to have that open communication without fear of some kind of harm or damage, or like really being able to express yourself um, sexually and feel good about it.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Um, yeah, so this was a very helpful and insightful conversation. I hope that if you are listening and you kind of resonated with what we said something that you could kind of take into your own health and take care of yourself with. And yeah, do you have anything else to say? For sure.
Sure. I always have tons and tons and tons to say, right? Um, but one thing I really want to hone in on is that, you know, in grooming situations, they often occur when sometimes we may not feel um, as loved in our other relationships or as respected or as honored as we may need to feel or want to feel, and that then someone comes in with this false sense of, I mean, this not false for us, but it is false because they don't really care, and we open up and we connect, and we think after this grooming situation or this relationship, I can never trust again. I can never have healthy relationships again. um, I am ultimately forever damaged in some way. I just want to say that is all untrue. You are not damaged. We all have experienced some kind of trauma in some kind of way. So you are not damaged. And the fact that someone manipulated or lied, coerced you and built a false trust, um, that is not your fault. And that you can have healthy relationships. You can have love in your life. You can have support in your life. Please don't let those instances or that situation derail your thinking or cause you to feel like you are unlovable, because you deserve love, you deserve respect, and you deserve honor.
Exactly. I just think that I know it's super difficult and it's a really painful process to move forward, to heal, but I think everyone deserves that chance and they deserve to give themselves the opportunity to heal and to grow. Um, Hopefully, you guys really enjoyed this episode, this interview. And thank you so much for joining us, Ebonique. You are really terrific, and I hope that you guys really check out her organization. And if you need help, please reach out. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Well, that's it for this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed it. You got to hear from some really great experts, Mathias, Ebonique, and Timothy. Thank you so much again for coming on the show and speaking to us. And hopefully you got something out of it because they said a lot of really valuable stuff. Let us know what you found the most useful. We would love to read through those comments. Anyways, yeah, thank you for listening, and we will see you in the next episode of Swiping Safely. Thank you. Bye.